Welcome back to Behind the Play. My name is Alex Adams, and I am joined by someone I've admired from afar for quite a while, and lucky enough to be joined on the show by Justin Bourne of Sportsnet. People know you from The Real Kipper and Bourne. You've been writing, doing a lot in the hockey sphere for quite a while, but thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show. Are you getting that hockey itch already? It's been the
Yeah.
summer for a long time. Do you feel like you're ready for training camp and everything to get started?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. I'm fascinated by anyone who does this work. And like yourself, you said you're a psychotherapist, so I could
Yeah.
use the therapy. This can work as a 2-for-1 session. But no, I am getting the itch. You know how I know it's happening is Nick Robertson signed today, and I cared. Like mid summer, you like see all the signings and stuff. You're like, yeah, whatever. Like I'll process that when it's time. It felt like time today. Like I really had opinions on it, and like that's in the season. It's just like I want to get them out. That's like part of having the show, and I felt
Mm.
like that today. So I'm ready to go.
Well, there's so many Nick Robertson opinions out there. I need to. Well, we'll get to that a bit
There
later.
shouldn't be that many. He's good. He's cheap. They need him.
They need a left winger. It's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we go to the Leafs, you've had a very interesting career, playing the game at a high level and then obviously becoming, a sports writer working for the Leafs for a while too. Just maybe tell us a little bit about your career journey and kind of how you fell in
Mhm.
love with the game. Obviously, your dad was a very good NHL player as well, but just talk a little about the beginnings of Justin Bourne falling in love with the
Yeah.
game of hockey.
I think one of the very different things about my own path was that I wasn't, despite having a dad who played, I wasn't forced into it or started young where I was in summer camps or anything like that. I just played because I liked it. And, I played house hockey and all the way through Pee Wee, I played house hockey. And, I was good at house hockey, but I was never worn down by the sport. And I see a bunch of kids now that are, 8 years old and on skating treadmills and all that. And so I really grew to love it kind of naturally. My parents were separated, so my dad wasn't around so much to, people think that would have been a big part of my story, but it wasn't. And so I found the love for the game as I got a little bit older, and I grew and always kind of scored at the house level, and it translated and translated. And I guess you end up being what you would call late bloomer. And I really felt like I kind of figured it out as I went. It was just, let's just see if I can get to the next level. And it worked for quite a while, which was good. But ultimately, it paid for my education. And it was a good behind the scenes into how the whole hockey world works. Because when I did get hurt playing in the minors, eventually, I found, I'll say this, I always felt as a player like I was a bit of a double agent. Like I always felt like I was observing what was happening, like I wasn't a part of it. You had these people that were just from this hockey obsessiveness and had like really strived to become great in hockey. And I was kind of just like, I get to be here too, That was kind of like, it felt like I don't know, even though I am very much of hockey with my background, I felt almost out of place. So when I did get to see all that, and then I got to kind of translate that into some writing, which I did when I was hurt while playing the ECHL. I really loved it, and I loved talking about the game and evaluating it. And
Hmm.
as we said before we turn on the cameras here, I went to school for psychology, and I love trying to figure out why coaches are the way they are and players are and the pressure. And I love that part of it. So even though I was a pretty good player and kicked it around a little bit, it now feels like this is what I was supposed to be doing within the sport, and I'm very content doing what I do.
What type of advantages do you think, now being on the other side, being in the media, that having that perspective of playing at a high level, and as you said,
Mm-hmm.
knowing what coaches are like in meetings and GMs and a locker room, like really feels like how did that kind of affect the way you wrote, in your opinion?
I think the biggest thing is I like to write like I want to sound like a hockey player still. I want to
Hmm.
sound like I'm in the dressing room, and I feel like there's a very particular cadence and style of in hockey media and hockey writing. And so when I started writing, I still wanted to sound like a hockey player. And so You had to convince an editor to leave all the colloquialisms in there and the slang. And initially, I wrote with gonna and instead of going to, and like
Mhm.
really wanted to sound like a hockey player. And so the fact that I became interested in like analytics and video work and some of the minutia of the game, I think being knowing how to talk like a hockey player from the dressing room allows people to take me semi seriously when I'm like pushing up my glasses and talking about expected goals saved above, whatever, because
Yeah.
I can still sound like someone who, can swear and spit and do all the other things that you do in locker rooms.
Maybe with that, going to, maybe tell us a little bit about that transition ending your career. I think I read that you were journaling a little bit throughout your hockey
Yeah.
career. That was kind of your form of writing, but then to take that step from going from a hockey career to becoming a sports writer.
Yeah, this business is not lucrative. And so when I made the transition, Hockey News is paying me $15 per article, which, tough to make a living out of that. But I did appreciate the exposure, right? Like that's a legitimate outlet, and at the time it meant a lot. And so I had just finished playing that year, and my wife had just finished her master's degree, and so we could basically pick anywhere in the world to live. It didn't really matter. I felt like I'd been ECHL All Star teams. I felt like I could pretty much pick an ECHL team, and they would want me. So we decided to go to Phoenix, where my mom had a place. They offered my wife a good job,
Hmm.
and I thought I could play for the Roadrunners while I figured it out and keep writing. After we made that decision, the Roadrunners folded. So I was like, I guess I'm a writer now. We'd moved there. And my wife said, why don't you take a year and see if you can make a living at it? We lived pretty modestly, and I just spent a year every day, running my own blog, tweeting, incessantly, and just seeing if anyone would want my work. And eventually it's like, all right, I'm making $15 for Hockey News, and then USA Today was giving me $100 every 2 weeks, and then you start to like kind of piecemeal this like little bit of income together. Twitter following grew. I ended up doing some Easton hockey like Twitter account stuff, which
Cool.
social media stuff back then, and I was just piecing it together enough that we felt like progress was there when we kind of got to the end of the year. And right in that summer, when it was like, okay, I might have to find something else to do, to make a living, the Score called from Toronto and said, can you be our hockey guy? We're launching this new blog. And they let me do a year in Arizona with the understanding that I would move back up to Toronto. So I ended up in Arizona for 3 years total. And then we moved to Toronto to work for the Score, and off I went from there.
And from the Score, you eventually went to the Leafs and worked as a video
Yeah.
coach under Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe as well for the Marlies. Maybe just talk about that whole experience that it feels like as a going from the writing side to then being a coach, but
Yeah.
obviously you played at a high level too, so it was warranted. But that transition, what was that like for you?
I think there's a sense where still just kind of figuring out what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do within this space. And, you know, when looking around the hockey media landscape, it's like, what isn't there much of that I can do? And it's X's and O's. Like no one, it's incredible. If you actually read hockey media work, there's almost nothing on X's and O's.
No.
Like there are some niche places now that you can find it way more now than there ever was. You would never just get a beat reporter talking about a system and what it actually was, aside from a vague reference to a system. So I would break down goals and just say, it's actually this guy's fault. The commentator said this, but here's what happened and here's why. And people loved it. That was like the first thing I had that I was like, oh, this is a thing that people like that
Hmm.
isn't anywhere else. And when I would write those pieces, I would get DMs from people in hockey that'd be like, yeah, that guy does that all the time. He's actually brain dead, or, like whatever the DM would be.
Yeah.
But Dubas and Keefe separately over a year or two wrote me about articles. They obviously stayed, they were young guys that were new, sort of in the hockey space too. And so they stayed connected with the media. And so after a couple of years of corresponding with them, Keefe eventually gets hired with the Marlies. and Babcock's with the Leafs, and Babcock was like, "I want more video people. Give me the Marlies video guy." And it was like November, and they didn't have a video guy. And Kyle and I had been communicating, and he knew I could do it. And he was like, "What do you think?" And I was like, let's go. It's just I went in to have a meeting with Sheldon to see if we'd get along. We got along, and the funniest part about that is when they had me in, they're like, "All right, so here's the computer server, and you just take that everywhere with you. It connects these 5 laptops, which connects." They started talking about all like the IT stuff, and I was like, "Wait, like like it was part of the video coach job was like help making people's computers work." And I was like, I don't know how to do any of this." And they're like, "Well, it's part of the gig." So I
Wow.
learned on the job in real time, which how to do some IT troubleshooting, which leads to some awkward moments in front of a hockey team trying to get like a projector to work by
Oh.
blowing on the cartridge like it's an old Nintendo or something. But it ended up working out.
Well, I know you said with that experience, like going back to the sports media world, that it was like this great education, as you said. Maybe how many times when you were in the room with Keefe or with Dubas did your views align, and how many times did they maybe differ?
Yeah. First thing I'll say is those guys are really smart hockey people, and they don't cut corners. There's no like willy nilly. They really wanted everything thoroughly evaluated. They wanted everyone's opinion who had one. I was really impressed with their ability to not just, "This is what I think," and go with it. They really heard everyone. I would say my view of hockey and Sheldon Keefe's were like really closely
Mm.
aligned. Like we really saw the game the same way, which I was very fortunate for that. Wasn't it the best of my mental health at that time? I really look back at those years and recognize like I
Mm.
could have been better for those guys. And I've since told them like, here's where I was at then. And it could have been better.
Yeah.
But I think hockey wise, we really closely aligned, and that led, Sheldon trusted me very quickly. And the next year, the second season with them, I was handed 4 teams in the league, and they said, you specialize in these teams. You're going to build the meetings for these teams. We want you to specialize in face-offs, and if you want to run the face-off meeting in front of the team, you can. Like they handed me
Mm.
things the second year,
Wow.
so I knew that was going well. I just personally wasn't in a place to, I had a young son who was just born. The traveling was hard. We don't have family in Toronto, and it was just at a point they did offer me another year, but it just felt at the time like I would be better off taking a job in media where I knew where I would be, and not traveling around upstate New York.
I'm sure you love Rochester. But
Yeah,
maybe kind of going a bit full circle, like you've now been at Sportsnet for a little while now, and maybe my last kind of question about that side of things is, what's it like having a a radio show, right, or a podcast as well? Like it's everything, it's everywhere, but and having, being with Kipper, I know it was maybe a bit intimidating
yeah,
at the beginning just to be with him, who's a big
yeah,
personality. How do you prepare for a 2 hour show every day for months?
yeah. It was intimidating because Kip and I didn't really know each other, but I was excited to work with him. And I will say, for Kip, he knows what he's doing. He's a smart guy.
Mm.
Like he
Yep.
he plays a I'm not going to say he plays a character, but he is aware that sometimes we need to be bigger and larger than life. And he is so smart and thorough, and he always comes with insights that I don't have, and he doesn't tell me before the show if he's got any tidbits. Like
Mm.
he is a fun guy to work with in that way. And it took a week or two for us to find our groove, and after that, we started to really make some or have traction. Preparation wise, we used to do a lot. We used to meet hours before the show. What do you think of that? What do you think of this hit? And we'd have these conversations. And then you'd go on air and you already know what the guy thinks, and you're trying to reenact the conversation,
Mm.
and it just comes off as inauthentic, and you miss the best points, which are shocking the guy.
Huh.
And so now we prepare way less than we used to, which I think you hear about a lot of good radio shows is, we say, like, do you see that hit last night? And he says more than anything he says before the show, he says, stop, stop, save it, save it. He doesn't want
Hmm.
to hear my opinion. Just, okay, we're going to talk about the hit. Okay, we're going to talk about that goal. Kip might be like, "Hey, I want to talk about Tampa Bay's defense today," and I'll be like, "Okay, that's weird," but like maybe he's heard something, and so I'll just know to kind of like look into what's going on there a little bit. So it's a lot of fun, and I'm very fortunate to get to work with him. He's a pro, and he knows that we're an entertainment product, so I give him a lot of credit for that.
Well, I love the show, and you guys are great. Also, shout out to Sam McKee as well, who's great out there.
Absolutely.
He's awesome. But maybe I think I do want to just touch upon your book because I found it was very inspiring and opening up and having a memoir and everything with and I guess just for you, you said something interesting that it was almost like a tattoo that you wanted to kind of get off your chest or I guess imprinted into a book. I don't know
Yeah.
or for
Yeah.
that, but maybe what was that process like for you to write, a memoir and kind of dig deep into that? Like how tough it
hmm
was it? How just what was that process like for you?
Yeah, it was a learning experience, and I think it was a lot like therapy where I'd write something about the experience I had, and a book like that is not necessarily a history of or report of. It's not, it's my sort of feeling and vibe that I had at those times. So I would write that. And I give Nick Garrison of Penguin Publishing a lot of credit because he would come back when I would send him chapters and he'd be like, this part here, you know, where's your dad in that part? Like, your
Mm.
dad won 4 Stanley Cups. Where, what's going on there? And I'd be like, all right. He'd say, well, did that bother you that he wasn't involved? And it's like, no, don't make me think about it. It's just like, so the writing of the book made me process things and look at things. And it was really healthy for me in the end. And the best part is those now are the parts of the books I appreciate the most. They're
Mm.
the parts that bring people to me in my email and DMs that people connect with. So, I think I sort of wrote my story in hockey, how I became a media guy, and my thoughts on some hockey things.
Mm.
And, through the process of, I also have an uncle named Ken Juba in Saskatoon who's great. Working with Ken and Nick and having them go, this is great, can we go deeper here? Those questions gave it whatever value I think it has, whatever lasting value I hope the book will have.
Mm. Well, I think, I mean, I never played high level hockey like you, but it's definitely, men in the game of hockey don't tend to open up, and it's always, it takes a lot of
Right.
courage to open up. So I appreciate you doing that, and it's a great book, and you're an amazing writer. So it was a very great and fascinating read. I want to go as best as I can segue to the Leafs because just why not?
Yeah.
You touched upon Robertson, so I'm gonna lead it off there just because it's the headline of the day. So
Yeah.
you have all these thoughts. Maybe your thoughts on the Leafs signing Nick Robertson to a 1 year deal for I think
Yeah.
875,000. Oh,
875. It was a deal where Robertson could have screwed himself pretty bad. I thought if he decided to dig in and say trade me, there's not enough trade value there for the Leafs to excuse me, to cow to that demand and say, oh, okay, well, we better get a sixth for this guy, or whatever you think the pick is. It's not going to be enough. You're better off with Nick Robertson. So to me, they were going to have to say, well, then you're not going to play. If you're going to sit at home, you're not going to sign a contract. We need, because I look back at Dubas and Nylander, and now it's like, would it have been better to make Willie sit out that whole year, the first year, and kind of show people that he couldn't be pushed around? Probably. The answer is yeah,
yeah.
probably would have been better. And I think Tree Living being new, I just don't think you could have he would have given Nick Robertson what he wanted. So Nick's choices were to dig in and watch hockey, or at least not be there for the start of camp when you start to fall behind. Lines are being made, you're finding chemistry, you're having, you're everyone is behind and you have the chance to score some goals because there's mistakes. So I think he's going to be there on the first day of camp. He's at great value. They're incentivized to make him work. They need help at left wing. What he shooted in 15 times last year. He
Yeah.
played third line and 13 minutes a game. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that with some opportunity, this guy can score 25 goals. And you score 25 goals and you're 24 years old, you get to then go to a team and go, now I want money. And they, yeah. And at least, the team has, if he wants to get traded, he has some value. It's just everything. It was the best thing he could have done was not hold out for another 100 grand now. It's going to pay off for him later.
One guy who's also gonna be going into a contract negotiation, or maybe not, who knows, but is Mitch Marner, and heading into his final year of his contract. As an outsider, I don't really see where the like it feels like a no-win situation for both sides. Just how do you think this plays out, and do you think like what are the chances he signs during the year? Do you think it's just an off-season thing at
Yeah.
this point? What do you think happens there with Marner?
I don't know, like nothing, like it's tough to imagine anything happening. I guess they're not going to walk him to UFA, are they? Like it just feels like that's what's going to happen where he's like, give me a ridiculous deal, which, they have proven that. And I say they, because he is a camp. He is not one man. He is a party of people there. They have proven themselves to be inflexible. And if they have larger demands, I don't think they're going to say, let's do the team a favor. And I don't see the team wanting to give them 8 times, whatever the number is, 12. I don't know. That's hard to believe too. So I don't know. I think it'll probably come down to some weird pressure point around trade deadline. Like, is there a way to convince him to go somewhere else or not? And I think he probably just stays to the end. I don't know, walks. That's the most likely. I currently, as of September 10th, do not have a good answer.
I mean, you know what? What's fair is that I don't think there is a good answer. So,
Yeah,
I guess maybe with that, like, where is the hope if you're a Leafs fan? Like, I know you've been on
yeah.
this, like, why are we running it back? It's been 3, 4, 5 years, but where's
Yeah.
maybe that little glimmer of hope if you're a Leafs fan heading into this season?
Dude, there's lots of hope. There's lots of hope. People talking about this Leafs team, it's the same team. It's like, well, first off, you got a 102-point team last year or whatever. And I think they got a little bit better this offseason. I think their D is going to be a bit better. Joe Wool, can he give them a healthy enough season? I think it's possible. And I like Stolars a lot too. So they can get decent goaltending. I think you're going to get improvement from Matthew Nyes. I think Bobby McMahon can be better. I think Robertson can score more goals. Like, I think there is hope there. And you still have a core of just like ridiculously talented players to, to continue to separate yourself from the pack. So I don't look at this team as like, they're in decline or on the way out or anything. I think they're going to be really good. I actually think Florida got, I'm lucky's not the word, but I think the Leafs should contend for the division this year. It's still a very good team. As frustrating as it is that they can't get over the hump, they're still a good hockey team. And if you have a chip in a chair long enough, sometimes you win the pot. So they're going to be in the mix again. We'll see if they make some great moves at the deadline or not, but they're going to be all right.
Do you think with that that they still have a possibility to be a cup contender, or has that maybe ship sailed at least for this year with all the Tavares contract still,
Yeah,
with 1 year left, and then of course Marner at 11 million as well, and just those contracts in their final year,
yeah.
w- w-
No, they can be a cup contender for sure. For sure they can. Like I don't I know last year's game 7 in overtime, in round 1, but that's a pretty good hockey team and they got nothing from Mitch Marner. And I know he's had some years where that's happened. I don't think it's going to happen forever. I don't. Like I
Mm.
think it's possible that even if he's okay, there's so much better if he's a point per game guy version of himself. They had terrible luck with Matthews and Nylander injuries in that first round, and I don't think the ship has sailed. And I do think that if they show themselves to be competitive, I think they'll continue to try to make moves. So maybe I'm just the ultimate rube, but I'm not going a whole year just beat my head against the wall saying, no, Eeyore, ho hum, they can't win. This is a team that can be in the mix for sure.
does Matthews get to 70 this year?
No, definitely not.
No,
Definitely not. Like maybe 55. Like I
55.
just think Berube is going to, want him to be a different player. And I don't think that includes being a guy who gets 30 assists. I think the contract year Marner, maybe Matthews is a 60 assist guy this year. Maybe it's a higher point total, but I don't think he's just going to have that giant 70 goal season this year. I hope I'm wrong. I love watching it, but I'm guessing no.
Maybe with that on Berube, and knowing Sheldon Keefe so well, what do you think the the main differences might be between this team
Yeah.
coached under Brewer compared to years prior with Keefe.
I think fundamentally, it's the very thing I said about Dubas and Nylander that I think the players will know that there will be expectations and repercussions. The previous Leafs teams felt like, the core guys ran the show. They could play terrible. They're out there at the end of the game. They could play great. They're out there at the end of the game. It didn't seem to matter. I thought Keefe, and I still believe Keefe is a great coach, but I do think their belief that elite players make all the difference went to a point where they let them have control of the team.
Mm.
And Berube is not going to do that. He's going to be the man in charge. And I can see it being a good fit. These guys knowing that it's no nonsense when they have to come answer to him in the video session the next day.
Yeah, no, it'll be definitely a fascinating year in Leafs land. Do you have before I let you go, I always ask guests just, their Stanley Cup pick. I know it's way too early, but it's always food for
Yeah.
fodder. Do you have one as we sit here on September 10th?
I think it's really hard to not say that the Edmonton Oilers are up there. That I really like Victor Arvidsson. They got Jeff Skinner, whatever you think of where he's at in his career. They were a very good team last year. And if you rack your brain for other teams, like Colorado's very good again, Dallas is very good again. It's probably their best competition there. And then on the other side, I don't know. Florida lost a couple of pieces in their end, and I guess a dark horse might be New Jersey, who I think Dougie Hamilton healthy. They get a goaltender, they get a new coach. Jack Hughes stays healthy. Like things could go better for them, but as of today, I'll take the Oilers. Ugh,
Well,
sorry.
yeah, no, I hope so too. I still feel as though as you said, I feel like the Oilers were the better team in that Stanley Cup final, even though
Yeah,
they lost it. But Bobrovsky was just unbelievable for a couple of games, and
the Oilers' top end is nothing like it in the league right now.
oh, yeah, you just cackle sometimes just seeing McDavid set up Draisaitl and or
It's
Hyman in front,
ridiculous.
and it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. But thank you so much, Justin, for taking the time and coming on. Is there anything you want to plug for your show? Just anything coming up at Sportsnet that people should listen or keep their eyes and ears?
Yeah. Real Kipper and Bourne is a few weeks away. I know a date, and you can't say it for some reason, but we're a
That's
few
okay.
weeks away. And then preseason games, I think, start September 22nd, and Kip and I will be on the panel, and we'll be ready to rock right away, right out of the gates.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see Nick Robertson in action on
Yeah.
September 22nd. And thanks so much for taking the time and sharing your story. And excited to be listening and seeing you on TV throughout the entire season.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me, man.